Hi there, and welcome to Anxiously Capable. If you're new here, this is a podcast where we talk about anxiety, OCD, and intrusive thoughts. I'm Jess Eden. I'm a qualified therapist based in the UK, and I created this podcast basically to help you thrive, not just survive, with anxiety and OCD, because it is possible to live a really fulfilling life even with anxiety and OCD. So, this episode is only going to be probably quite a short one. But basically, we're going to be talking about the small lifestyle habits that I do for anxiety and OCD. So, these are the small, simple, everyday things that I found that help reduce my anxiety, my OCD, my need for compulsions, and my overall feeling of overwhelm. What this episode isn't is it's not a list of things that you should be doing. I really don't want you to come away from this episode thinking, oh, Jess is doing that, I need to do that. These are the things that I've found that fit into my lifestyle. They might not fit into yours. And that's part of what anxiety and OCD recovery is. It's about finding the things that work for you, not because it works for somebody else. So take this episode as inspiration, maybe to give you a few ideas, a couple of things to reflect on, see if it works for you or not. So please don't come away from this episode feeling overwhelmed, feeling like you've suddenly got to fit these things into your life, because these are lifestyle habits. These are changes that have kind of developed for me over time, that I've learned over time. And it's so important to find what works for you as well. But just before we do get into this episode, while I am a therapist, this podcast is not a substitute for mental health support or mental health treatment. In this episode, I'm sharing my own experiences with anxiety, with OCD, and the lifestyle habits that have helped me, but this should not be taken as therapeutic advice or guidance. So, straight into lifestyle habit one is making the anxious choice. And a little bracket to this is when possible, and I'll get into that. So, you know, those moments where you're wanting to do something, maybe you're really excited for it, maybe you're meant to be going out with some friends, you're going out for lunch, and all of a sudden you're hit with that overwhelming anxiety. What if this goes wrong? What if I can't catch my bus? What if the train's late? What if there's nothing on the menu that I like? What if so and so doesn't turn up? In those moments, that's when anxiety is telling you that you can't or that you shouldn't do something. It's really trying to make you panic and make you avoid doing that thing. When I say making the anxious choice, what I mean is 9 times out of 10, when anxiety shows up like that and I've got plans or there's something I want to do, and suddenly anxiety is turning around and saying, you can't do this, you shouldn't do this because of XYZ, 9 times out of 10, I will make the choice to go and do that thing. I will make the choice to go and do the thing that I was going to do before anxiety and OCD told me I couldn't. And if you follow any anxiety and OCD therapists, this is what we mean when we talk about making exposure and response therapy part of your lifestyle. And when we talk about living a life alongside anxiety and OCD, not controlled by it. When anxiety is stepping in and saying, you can't do this, you shouldn't do that, this is going to make you feel anxious, the more you avoid something, the more your anxiety learns that there's a reason to be scared of that, the stronger it's going to come next time you do it in that thing. So if you avoided going out for a meal with your friends because you felt anxious, your anxiety is going to be stronger the next time you try and do something like that, because you've essentially reinforced the idea that it is something to be feared, it's something to worry about. So if you don't avoid the thing, and yeah, you're going to feel anxious, you're going to feel really worried. There's no way around that, because that anxiety is flaring up, it's there, you're already feeling it. You might as well go and do the thing and feel anxious than avoid it and feel anxious anyway. And when I'm talking about this, I realize it's a lot easier said than done. I do know that. I am aware of it. I'm talking about this from a point of, I've done this since 2018. I've faced these things since 2018. I've made that anxious choice since 2018. So it's easier to do that now. But in the beginning, that is going to be hard. That's going to be really tough, really, really tough. But a big part of anxiety recovery is teaching yourself, teaching your anxiety, teaching your nervous system, that part of you, that flight or fight that's kicking off, teaching that part of you that you are safe. And you can do this by telling yourself that you're safe, reassuring yourself, all of that. But nothing is ever going to work as well as teaching yourself, physically showing yourself that you are safe, you can get through these moments, you can go into these situations that anxiety is telling you can't cope with, or that you shouldn't go to, or that you're going to struggle with. You can feel that anxiety, you can feel that worry, but you can get through that situation. You can get through that moment, and you come away from that not having avoided the anxiety, having literally sat through it, gone into those really tough situations, and come out learning I can handle that. And that's what you teach yourself, that you can handle it. With that being said, I do have a little kind of note to add about that. If you're in the beginning stages of this, there is one thing that you need to know before you start doing this. And this is where the 9 times out of 10 that I previously mentioned comes into this, because you can't always make the anxious choice. There is the potential that you could choose to do this at times and it will be too overwhelming. So, what I really encourage with this is start small. Start really, really small. You can almost create a hierarchy of things that make you feel anxious. If you rate them out of 10, 1 being it doesn't trigger as much anxiety, 10 being absolute maximum anxiety, that's when I feel it hardest. Start with those lower numbers. The things that don't trigger your anxiety as much, it is going to be easier to face them. It's going to be less overwhelming. You can build up that experience. You can build up that tolerance for it. You can build up that feeling of, I can do this, I can sit with this anxiety, and I am okay. And then when you get to the bigger things, the things that trigger your anxiety more, the places, people, situations, whatever it is, those bigger triggers that you've rated maybe like an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10, you will be in a better position to make the anxious choice then. It's so important to start with those smaller, less anxiety inducing situations and build up that feeling of safety, that feeling of, I can do this, I can sit with this anxiety, it is okay for me to face these fears. There's a concept that I use with a lot of clients called the window of tolerance. And basically, we all have this window of things that we can cope with, things that feel okay. And if we push ourselves too far out of that window, we cause too much anxiety. I'm going to link this down below because it may be helpful for checking in with your anxiety levels. So if you're in a situation and you're thinking, I want to make the anxious choice, I want to do the thing that I would have done if anxiety and OCD hadn't stepped in and told me that I couldn't, just check in with your anxiety levels. See how you're feeling, see how possible it feels. And if it feels like too much to make that anxious choice, that is okay. It's okay. Show yourself some compassion. We're all going to have those moments. I have those moments now. There's times where I am in one of these situations where I'm thinking, right, I'm going to make the anxious choice. And it does feel like too much. It still can feel like too much. So making the anxious choice has become a big part of my life. That is probably one of the biggest lifestyle habits that actually helps my anxiety and OCD, because every time I make that anxious choice, every time I do that thing that anxiety says I can or that I shouldn't, I'm living a life that isn't controlled by anxiety. So let's move on to habit number 2, and that is mindful movement. And you're probably going to listen to this section and think, Christ, everybody talks about movement and exercise for anxiety, and that's not quite what this is. It's a little bit different. So let me get into it. The main kind of mindful movement lifestyle habit that I do is walking every day. This is a lot easier for me because I do have a dog. I have to walk every day, but it is also a really major part of my life. And I had other forms of mindful movement before I got Darcy, and I'll get into that. But basically, when I say mindful movement, I don't mean power walking down the street. I don't mean getting from one destination to another. I don't mean rushing. I don't mean trying to be out for half an hour and thinking, yep, okay, 30 minutes, I'm going home, I'm getting back. No, that's not mindful movement. Mindful movement is slow. It's about being very present, no headphones, no podcasts, no audiobooks, nothing that is taking your focus and your concentration. It's basically a way to really slow down, really be in the present moment, really switch off your racing mind and just really be in the present moment. But the main way I used to do this pre-Darcy was swimming, because swimming for me was quite a calming habit. You couldn't have headphones, you couldn't listen to music. Well, you could, I'd have to buy waterproof headphones, but I never did. So I couldn't listen to music, couldn't listen to an audiobook, couldn't listen to a podcast. So I was very much present. And because when you're swimming, obviously you can feel the water and things like that. It's a really good way to ground yourself. Mindful movement for me has been quite a game changer because anxiety often wants us to rush. It wants us to speed up. It wants us to find a solution. It wants us to do something. It's almost like it's really putting the pressure on us to rush, to do something, to speed up, to take life really fast. By focusing on this habit of mindful movement every day, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 15 minutes, nothing really big, nothing really extreme, but that short amount of time is a little break from that rush of anxiety. It's almost like a little pause in the day where the anxiety, yeah, it might try and come in, it might try and creep in and tell you need to speed up, but you're giving yourself that time to slow down. So, for habit number 3, it is watching how I speak to myself. And this is what I mean when I say these are lifestyle habits. I'm not telling you to journal. I'm not telling you to do yoga. I'm not telling you to actually do anything specific. These are just things that I have incorporated into my lifestyle. I guess these are more ways of being than they are lifestyle habits, but lifestyle habits was the closest term I could think of. So, watching how I speak to myself. And if you're listening to this and you do experience anxiety and OCD, you probably know exactly what I mean by this. Anxiety and OCD have a tendency to be incredibly critical. So I've heard people call OCD like a bully before, and I think that's a really, really accurate term. But that kind of overly critical, trying to beat you down, tell you that you can't do something, tell you that you shouldn't do something, that is exactly how anxiety and OCD feel to me. So when I say watching how I speak to myself, I mean, really watching out for this critical side of anxiety and OCD and trying not to internalize that and make that my own voice and the way that I feel about myself and the way that I see things. So, a lifestyle habit that I always try and do is being more compassionate in my self talk. So, if I catch anxiety and OCD saying these kind of things to me, telling me that I can't do something, telling me that I shouldn't do something, being overly critical, then I try and make this self talk a bit more compassionate, a bit kinder, a bit more understanding. So, probably the main and most accessible way that I do this that might be quite helpful for you to know if you're wanting to work on your self talk around anxiety and OCD is celebrating the small wins. Let me give you an example for this. If we think of anxiety and OCD being overly critical, it's that feeling of nothing is ever going to be enough for anxiety and OCD. For example, you might get a new job, and part of you might be thinking, that's great, I've got this new job. And then anxiety could step in and be like, yeah, but you can't do it. Yeah, but are you actually going to be good enough at that job? What if everyone learns out that you're a fraud? And do you see what I mean by anxiety doesn't let you have those moments? It doesn't let you enjoy those little achievements. It's always going to find something to criticize you about, something to pick you apart on. It is going to find a way to come in and tell you that something could go wrong, or you're not going to be good enough at that, or what if everyone learns out you're a fraud, you're an imposter. And that's why it's really important in these situations where that self talk is stepping in, that critical self talk, that you celebrate those small wins. Celebrate the big wins, but celebrate the small wins. It goes back to habit 3 in a way, because say making the anxious choice for you is walking down to the corner shop, whereas anxiety is telling you that you can't do that, you shouldn't do that. And you do that. You make that anxious choice. You come home, you've gone to the corner shop, celebrate that small win. That is a huge achievement. You have made that anxious choice. That is a massive achievement. Anxiety is probably going to step in and be like, it's not good enough. Yeah, but it's not good enough progress. Anyone can do that. No, not anyone can do that. You're going through a really tough thing and you've just done something amazing. So celebrate that small win. These small wins are so important, and the more we celebrate them, the kinder our self talk becomes, and the quieter that internal, overly critical, anxious voice becomes. So let's do a little roundup. The 3 lifestyle habits that I do for anxiety are habit 1, making the anxious choice, habit 2, mindful movement, no headphones, no podcasts, nothing to kind of distract you, mindful movement. And habit 3, watching how you speak to yourself and celebrating those small wins. If you take anything from this, please celebrate those small wins. So we're at the end of this Anxiously Capable episode. Thank you for listening. This was only a short one, but I would love to hear your experiences with anxiety and OCD. Is there any lifestyle habits that you've noticed reduce your anxiety, reduce your overwhelm? Any lifestyle habits that help you manage anxiety and OCD? You can share them with me on Instagram at Therapy with Jess Eden, or you can comment below this episode and you can share them with us all, because some of the things I've said today might not help you, they might not work for you, but you might read something in the comments that someone else has done that they found helpful, that works for them, or if they've adapted anything I've said today in a way that works for them, amazing. But thank you for listening. It has been great having you here. Please don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to follow so you don't miss next week's episode. Episodes are released every Monday, and I can't wait to see you next Monday. Bye.